Hey, how you doing? I was just thinking here, I've turned to the passage I'm going to use today, and I've been giving a lot of thought. At my age, that's basically what I get to do, is to reminisce, draw up memories, think about the days of old. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm going to be looking at a verse with you in Jeremiah. If you'll turn there, it's in Jeremiah chapter 6. But I want to speak to you again, as I always do, from my heart. I really do want to speak to you from my heart. As you know, because I'm talking to some people that just have some common sense and can see things on the direction that they ought to be seen. And so I want to speak to your heart today, and I want you to think about this. As you know, here we are in the month of November, and we'll just have another month left, and we'll be going to enter into the new year. A new year. I do feel sorry for the present generation that is living today. I feel sorry for them, and here's the reason why. Most people living today have no idea, no clue of the joy of living in the beginning to the middle of the past century. For example, they don't have any clue of what the early 1900s to the 1950s really were like. Well, I want you to know, I've got some thoughts I want to give to you. The age before there was all this modern technology. Now, you're going to think that I'm totally against all the technology that we have today, and I'm not. But I want you to know what it has done as far as its damages. However, I have to confess there are some good things of the technology that we have gleaned from as well. But before, I just want you to understand, before all this modern technology, the age before space travel, let's say, and the age before jet airplanes, and even the age before the internet, computers, even electronic now plane tickets. I'm going to be flying to Illinois to speak. And just got on the electronic system and got my own plane ticket, got my seating assignment, and my ticket's on the phone. All I got to do is go to the airport and show off on some machine there my ticket, and I'm ready to go aboard. I mean, travel today is unreal. We have not only the cars, but we got the planes, we got the buses, we got the jets, and we got all kinds of things. I think about automated banking now, where you can just, you don't have to go down and make deposits. You can do it from your own house based on the technology. And you got ATMs where you can go pick up some cash if you want to. You don't have to go to a bank to get it. You just go to an ATM. And we have cars and motels and ships and trains and everything. I mean, it's just amazing to me where we have progressed as far as technology is concerned. The age, there was an age at one time, and I grew up in that age, being 84 years old. There was an age at one time that was before fast foods. Drive-through restaurants like McDonald's or Taco Bell or Burger King or Wendy's or Pizza Hut or Dairy Queen or Kentucky Fried Chicken or Arby's or Fast Eddie's or Domino's, and you got all the home deliveries and everything. There was an age before all that. You understand that, don't you? And most of our people that's grown up within the last 40 years know nothing of the old age when we didn't have those things. There was a time, believe it or not, where there were no such thing as a credit card or a debit card or electronic checkout or calculators. I could have used a calculator when I was in high school, but There was no calculators, no digital anything. There were no digital clocks or car dashes or cash registers or gas pumps or stereo equipment or VCRs or wristwatches or CDs, or none of those kind of things. The age before remote controls. I'll never forget the first time I ever saw a remote control. It set me back, man. I mean, you can have a remote control and open a garage door now, or turn on your TV, or even strike up your fireplaces, your gas fireplaces, or some stove, or even furnaces or air conditioning, or you got video cameras and robots and toilet flushers and hot tubs and electric lights. My goodness. Compare that to the age that I lived in. I like all this sophistication stuff, I guess, but this high-tech stuff. But listen, after living in both worlds, the old-time world and today, the old and the new, I really do believe this from the bottom of my heart. My choice would be to go back to the old. I think with all of my heart that's exactly what I would rather desire. Listen to what the Bible says, and I can maybe have somebody criticize me and say you're pulling it out of context. Maybe, but I don't believe so. But listen to what it says. I'm in Jeremiah chapter 6. Look at verse 16. Here's what it says. It says, "Thus saith the Lord." Well, if he says it, that's pretty good stuff, isn't it? Thus saith the Lord. If the Lord says it, we better take heed to it, obey it, believe it, practice it, and love what he says. But what's he saying here? "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see." Oh, well, that's what I'm doing now with all this technology. I'm standing in the ways and I'm seeing what all of this modern technological information has done for us. And he says, "Thus saith the Lord, stand in the ways, see what's going on." And then look what he says as an answer to that. After you've stood in the ways and after you've seen, he says, "Ask for the old paths." Oh. So even God says in this particular time the old was better, right? Ask for the old paths. Now wait a minute. That's not all it says. Listen to this. "Ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein." In other words, you can see everything that's going on in the modern way. Why don't you just go back to some of the old ways? Go back to the old paths. Go back to the time when things were different but better. Go back to the old paths. Now listen to what else he says. "Where is the good way? The old is the best. And ye shall find rest for your souls." Oh my goodness. Everybody is searching and looking and desiring to have rest, peace for their soul. Because we're so confused today. We're so taxed. We're so stressed. We're so active and so burdened. But if you look at the present day in which we live with all of what technology has brought to us and see the way that we're in now, the Lord says, hold it. Go back to the old days. Go back to the old path. I like the way he put it. Listen to this. And it says, "Where is the good way? And walk therein." In other words, get back and draw some of the old back in your life today. That's what he's saying. Today's technology, today's lifestyle, today's way of living is not the best, because look what it's done to you. Look what it's done to your family. Look what it's done to your church members, fellow members. Look what it's done to the society in which we live. Look at what today's ways have brought to us. And the Lord is calling our attention to that. And he's saying, where is the good way, and walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. Well, I'm telling you what now, as I look back after being alive these 84 years, and I got to live since 1939 when I was born, up into the time of the 50s, and saw the old paths, saw the old ways, saw the old lifestyle, saw all of, not the convenience of technology we had today, but I got to enjoy life in the old way, in the old times. And the Bible says, where the Lord said in that verse, if you read it very carefully, and you ought to read it, because here's what he said, because I'm talking to people right now, that this is what your decision is. He said in the last part of that verse, but they said, after he told them what to do, but they said, we will not walk therein. We will not live that kind of a lifestyle. We have been so adopted to and so addicted to the technological society in which we live today. There's no way we'll ever try to bring back the old today. They said, we will not walk therein. Folks, now listen. I like I said, the conveniences that we have today. But I liked a whole lot better when in the old days, when things were not like they are today, where we had rest for our souls. I'm going to give you some things. Not because I didn't like all of the conveniences that we have today, but because I like the better old character of people back then. I mean, people had some character. Good night of living. Do you understand? People were not even... I wasn't raised in a Christian home, but even people that were not Christians had some principles that they lived by. They had some character. They had some determination. They had some good philosophies of life. I believe we were so much better off and so much more happy and very much more honest and much more compassionate toward our fellow man in those days than we even have a sense of what's going on today with all of those things. I realize it sounds boring, but think of how simple lives were then. And I still practice this when I'm at home at the most part, but back then and even in my life today, you go to bed if you can about 8 o'clock and rise up at 5 in the morning. We didn't have late night television. And we did not go to different places and spend out late hours at night. We had some things that we had to accomplish and achieve the next day, so we'd go to bed early and get up early in the morning and get the jobs done so that we could enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the efforts of what we put forth for that time. Oh, how I remember those days. Days when we raised our own food. Boy, that's a need today. Didn't have all the preservatives in it. We didn't have all of the poison things, chemicals put into it. And we had vegetables. We raised our own vegetables. We raised our own meat. We raised our own gardens. We raised our cattle. Our pigs. We did our own butchering. And when we did, the neighbors would come and help us butcher a cow or a pig or whatever and help us cut it all up and wrap it and package it. Everybody worked together back then. They didn't work against each other. They worked with and for each other. I'll tell you one thing. My mom, she used to can all the fruit and vegetables out of her garden. Have you ever tasted homemade biscuits with homemade butter? I don't mean biscuits out of a box. I mean homemade biscuits. And I mean homemade butter. Butter where you went down and milked the cow and you skimmed the cream and you put it in a jar with a little paddle in the jar and roll it back and forth across the floor until it got hardened and made butter. Have you ever had that kind of butter? I'm telling you what, man, you talk about good. It wasn't store-bought. It was real. Ask for the old paths. Yeah. There's nothing like the taste of that homemade butter on homemade biscuits with homemade preserves, strawberry preserves, and all of the other, I mean, you talk about preserves, my goodness, you talk about, it was unreal what my mom used to make. And then we'd have what we call sourdough pancakes. And I want you to know something. Now get this. My mom had the recipe of making her own sourdough. Now, it took a long time, probably, I'm talking about a few months, to get the sourdough to be in a condition of sour, like it's supposed to be able to use it to make different things like bread and pancakes and so forth. But I have never in my life tasted anything as good as real, honest-to-good sourdough pancakes. Sourdough pancakes with chokecherry syrup. Or sometimes, my dad taught us this, we'd have a sourdough pancake. I can't hardly, my mouth waters thinking about it. And we'd have that pancake on our plate. And he taught us how to take a little bit of sugar and sprinkle a little bit of sugar on that pancake, and then take some real, honest-to-goodness cream that was separated from the milk by an old-time separator that you would crank around and around, pour the milk in there, and it separates the milk from the cream, and you got that real, true, genuine cream. And it's thick. And you put the sugar on that sourdough pancake, and then you put that cream on top of that sugar, and then dive into that pancake. Oh my goodness, give me the old paths. Not this modern stuff you already go down there, it's already pre-made, you stick it in the microwave and puff. And puff is what it ought to be. But I'm telling you the truth. I really am telling you the truth. Think about all of the good stuff. Homemade apple pies with homemade ice cream, and every Thanksgiving, like we just are approaching, and all the Thanksgiving. My goodness. Homemade apple pie. And the apples were homemade too, because you grew your own apples. And of course, ice cream. I'm talking about the old ice cream where you crank that, put the ice and the salt. You got all the ingredients in the little tube there that fits in that little bucket thing, and you turn it around, and you keep adding the ice and the salt in around that tube that you turn around, and it makes that homemade ice cream. Not these modern things where you can make your own ice cream. It's not even close to the same. Not even close. I've had it all. But the old is the best. Mom could can green beans, and she did, and she had carrots and dill pickles of the best. Beets, peas, pears and peaches and jellies and chokecherry and apple butter and crab apple and sauerkraut and root cellar filled with potatoes and turnips and rutabagas. All of those things. I'm saying we need to ask for the old paths. The old paths. We had to harvest our own ice. We had what we called, in those days where I lived, what we called ice houses. We chopped our own wood. We never heard of a chainsaw or an electric saw. We chopped. We used an old axe with a wooden handle and a tree that had dried out to be used for firewood, and we chopped it at the right length to put into the stove. Yeah. Ask your kids if they've ever heard of anything like that. Ask your kids if they've ever heard anything else that I've talked about so far. And the answer is no. They're technologically inclined. I mean, all they have is a cell phone and a computer and all of these different programs, and they sit around getting their minds filled with trash instead of enjoying the old path. The Lord said, ask for the old paths. I realize we can't and won't go back to all of those things that I just mentioned already, but at least there ought to be some kind of an old-time, old-fashioned philosophy that we're trying to instill in the lives of our kids in reference to homes and so forth. I mean, our recreation time, when I was a kid growing up, to the kids today would probably be considered boring. In the summer, after working, preparing for the meals and preparing, I should say, for our fields, for hay and oats and wheat and everything that would feed our livestock. And, getting ready, we'd have our own branding, our cattle, and we'd have to build fences and dig post holes and stretch wire and build corrals and cut poles and all, and work hard doing those kind of things. Hard work, sweating hard. And then there's a little river that flew right down just a couple of miles away from our ranch, right through the little town of Musselshell, Montana, called the Musselshell River. And Dad would let us every once in a while, after working a hard day's work and full of sweat and dirt from working, he'd let us ride our horses to town and dive into that river and just be refreshed with that water. And we enjoyed it and had fun doing it. Give me the old paths. Give me the old-fashioned way. We would, in the wintertime, after school and after chores and even after supper, we would go down to the old Musselshell River, and by then it would be all frozen over. And we'd scoop the snow off and just have the ice where we scooped the snow off in big areas, and we'd build a huge fire out of tires. We'd get the old used tires that were discarded away, and they let us have them, and we'd build a fire and burn those tires. You get a lot of black smoke, but you got a lot of heat where you could get warm. And what we would do, where we took the snow off, we'd put on some old rickety ice skates and have a skating time. I'm talking about kids that come in from the ranch to enjoy that, and kids that may have lived in town, and we just go down to that Musselshell River and skate and get by the fire and stay warm and have a good time. A real good time, not a sinful time, just a time of just enjoying people, friends, family. What a way to live. No wonder the Lord said, the old paths are better. We would sled down hills. I wish you could have seen our sled. The old rickety thing, but it had the rails on it, and we could slide down the hills. We had horse-drawn sleds, and all of those different things that we were able to have in those days. We often attended community and church socials. Church socials like picnics. And once a month, in our little town of Musselshell, I only had 40 people in the population of the town, they would have once a month, on a particular day, a film. The old reel-to-reel film. And they would be upstairs in the room. People would bring their own, everybody would bring something like popcorn or cookies or cakes or pies. And we'd look at that old film, and I'm talking about some old Western. Hopalong Cassidy or something of that nature, a Roy Rogers film. And we got to sit up there and eat that popcorn and those pies and those cookies that people would bring and just have a good time of fellowship. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. I would not trade that for your modern theaters today, or your videos, or your television set. To be in that environment with family and friends and fellowship and laughter and fun is so much better than anything that we have today. It's unbelievable. In the evenings, often at home. And anywhere else that we could. We would play some simple games. I mean, games, or I'm talking about at home now. Or my dad would like, there'd be a boxing match going on. And we had the old radio that didn't get much reception and had a lot of static and everything. But we could get all around that radio and we could listen to a radio program, and it might be a comedy or it might be a mystery or it might be a boxing thing that was going on my dad would listen to. And we thought that was the greatest entertainment and the most fun for the family that ever. Try that today for your kids. Try that. We didn't have convenience stores. Mom was the convenience store. And she would always have something to snack on, whether it be homemade peanut butter or a peanut brittle and taffy pulls and sugar candy, which would be hard candy, or something sweet once a week. And my dad would always make, at one time, root beer. Root beer. He'd make his own root beer. And he had a way of putting it in the bottles and had a way to cap it. And you had to let it sit for a while. And so he'd stick it underneath the bed, and it had to be under, to get it out of the way, he'd just stick it underneath the bed somewhere. But as it was going through its process that Dad had for it to be where it would mature and be ready to drink the root beer, every once in a while in the middle of the night you could hear the and a lid would pop off of one of the bottles, and you could hear the foam. And we kids would dive underneath that bed to grab the one that was just popped its lid and try to get the foam that's coming out. And we had such a good time. Had a good taste too. But it's just something, I mean, ask for the old paths. I'm telling you, I long for people today to enjoy some of the old-fashioned living that we once enjoyed in our country. We would not have been in this kind of country if we had not gotten so involved with all of the modern technology that has taken us away from our family life. Now I realize we're here. There's nothing we can do about it, except I think we need to try to establish somehow, some way, an old-fashioned marriage where husbands loved their wives, wives loved their husbands, children loved their parents and obeyed them, and we'd have an old-fashioned home. I mean, back then not everyone was a Christian, but they practiced Christian principles in their home for the most part. Dad was always the man of the house. He was the guy. I mean, man of the house. Very masculine, not one of these little feminine type guys today. He was a masculine man. He had authority. I mean, not demanding. He had authority. Everyone in the home respected and honored his position. And Dad was always the breadwinner. He was always the one who brought in the wages. He earned the paycheck. Mom was so busy in being his helpmeet, in helping cooking and cleaning and canning, she could never have had an outside job. No way. She was at home doing what a lady does at home, and that is being a helpmeet to her husband, raising the children, keeping the house. And the Bible's very plain in saying that. If you read your New Testament, that says women are to be keepers at home. Look at today. How many are at home keeping it? I realize the economy and the financial needs have forced the women out of the house, and we're in the condition that we're in today because of that. No question about it. When we got away from the old-fashioned home life, the old-fashioned way of living, when that communist said, "We will destroy America so gently she won't even know she's dead," they did it by destroying the effects of a biblical Christian home. Our country's in the shape it's in today because of the home being in the shape it's in today. I'm saying, let me see, I'm going to run out of time here, but let me just say this. I wish I had time, I'd go through this whole thing. But we need some old-fashioned home life. We need some old-fashioned daddies, and we need some old-fashioned mamas. I remember my grandma, and my mom too, and my wife a lot of times would always wear aprons. They were home girls, keeping home, keeping at the house, raising the kids. cleaning house, cooking meals, canning, getting everything taken care of. And they would wear aprons. I don't know about you, but I love to see a lady in an apron where it's an expression of motherhood. I mean, we've got to get back to something here in our country. If the Lord's going to tarry at all, we've got to have some old-fashioned ways back. So there's such a need today for the areas of old-fashioned living. I mean that. With all my heart, I mean that. Regardless of all the conveniences, the modern gadgets, the high-tech machines and so forth, regardless of all the crime and the fears and the upheaval, the ruining and the running to and fro and the busy schedules and the sinful society we live in, don't you, I mean, as I'm speaking to you, don't you have a longing for a touch of the old-fashioned style of living where it would do what the Bible says, that you would find peace for your soul? I mean, you have rest for your souls. Don't you have a longing for the rest for your soul? Well, the Bible tells us how. Get back to the old paths. Wouldn't home be a better place if Dad would just take his place and Mom would take her place and the kids would take their place? Wouldn't that be a better place? Wouldn't our churches be a better place to attend if each one of us were baptized into a life of friendliness and kindness and peace and pleasure and the old-fashioned hospitality? We need to work on that. Let me read the verse again and I'll close. But listen to this. This is God speaking, and He's saying in verse 16, "Thus saith the Lord." Well, if He's saying it, like I said in the beginning, we need to pay attention to it. What's He saying? He saith, "Stand ye in the ways and see." In other words, look at the kind of a lifestyle you're in right now and look what's happening right now. That's what He's saying. Stand ye in the ways and see. Look what's going on. Then He says this, and ask who? Ask the Lord. Ask your family. Ask for the old paths. Where is the good way, and walk therein. In other words, find out what the old paths would bring as far as rest for your souls and walk in it. Do it. Don't just talk about it. Do it. Walk in the old paths, in the old way. And we need to do that in our homes. We need to do that in our churches. We need to do that in our country. We need to do that in our world. We need that. Why? Because the Bible is very plain to tell us why. And ye shall find rest for your souls. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close that Bible right now because I'm done. But you listen to me. We're not going to have any rest for our souls until we get back to the old-fashioned way of life. The old-fashioned home life, the old-fashioned Bible life, the old-fashioned church life, the old-fashioned living life. I mean, a righteous life, a holy life, a good life, a godlike life. And there's not any rest for our souls until that happens. I love you. And I desire for you to experience what that real rest, that real peace, that real joy for your soul is. God help you, folks. I pray that you give thought to the old-fashioned way by living the old paths. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back with you again. God bless.